everyone, and welcome to In Second Thought from Hadran. And today I want to speak about the Ktoret, the incense. Out of all the sacrifices in the Mikdash, this is a unique kind of korban. It's not from flowers, it's not from animals, it's all about smell. Let me share the sources and start to dig in. Gemara in Zevachim 88 is telling us the following. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said, there are two matters that we do not find for them an atonement with offerings, but we find for them an atonement from another place, and they are bloodshed and malicious speak. And with regard to malicious speak, says Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, its atonements come from the incense. As Rav Hanania teaches in the Baraita, from there it is derived that the incense affects where is it derived that the incense affects atonement, as it is stated, after the story with Korach and the plague in the people, and he put on the incense and made atonement for the people. In other words, the Ktoret is what stopped the plague, and from here we learn that Ktoret is very good against malicious speech that happened with Korach, and it stopped the plague. And similarly, the school of Rabbi Ishmael teaches, for what does incense affect atonement? It affects atonement for malicious speaks, and why? It is in order that an item that is offered in private, i.e. the incense which is offered by a priest acting alone, shall come and atone for an action generally occurring in private. In other words, the Ktoret that most of the year was brought in the Heichal, but once a year was brought in Kodesh HaKodeshim by the high priest in a private place, will atone for a malicious speech that usually happen in private between two people. So this is how we start in Masechet Zevachim regard to the Ktoret, which is very, very unusual, and it's not a regular korban. But I want to start dafka from the 13th century, because what we find in the 13th century, the book of the Zohar, is really an astonishing thing, because if there is no more Mikdash, what can we do that resembles bringing the Ktoret? We know that Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai said that for instead of korbanot, we can do chesed. And the Chachamim in Yavne are saying, instead of the korbanot, we're going to have 3 times a day tefillot. But what can we do instead of bringing the Ktoret by the high priest in Kodesh HaKodeshim in Yom Kippurim and the rest of the days in the Heichal? And what we know, and we all know it from our Siddur, that we have the paragraph of Pitum HaKtoret to say the work of the Ktoret, the process of bringing the Ktoret, including what the Ktoret was made of, twice a day, in the morning and in the evening in Mincha. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is, according to the Zohar, is saying, if people knew how great the act of incense is before God, they would take every word of it and place it on their heads like a crown of gold. Pay attention, says the Zohar, to recite the Ketoret. Every word is important. And if you put yourself into each word, it's like you're having crown gold. And whoever strives for it and must contemplate the act of incense, and if he reads the section of incense every day and meditates on it, he has a share in this world and the world to come, and death will depart from him and from the world, and he will be saved from all the laws of the world and from evil and from all the laws of hell and the kingdom of other kingdoms. These are big words. This tells us that the Jewish mysticism viewed reciting the Ktoret as a high moment in the time of Tefillah. We don't have Kohen Gadol anymore, but we each became a Kohen saying the Ktoret during our davening, and it is the words itself are, are doing great and secretive and mysterious things. Where does it all start from? So the first time we hear about the Ktoret is in Sefer Shmot, in Parashat Kitisa, where God tells Moshe, take all these incense, then take all these herb stackets, and make them into an incense, a compound expertly blended, refined, pure, sacred. This is going to be a sacred smell, a sacred ktoret blend together with different herbs and samemanim. And what you're going to do with it is going to be sacred, and no one else should do it in their house. And if someone is trying to do it in his house, they're going to be cut off from kin. And we have stories about in the Gemara that there was only one family who knew exactly the secret of Ktoret, that they were not telling it even after the destruction of the temple. It's special, it's holy, it's unique, it's only in the Mikdash. And when we think about the questions of why, what is behind the Ktoret, we start to get different answers throughout the generation. So the Rambam in Mocheh Nevochim is giving a very practical reason. First, he says, if the house of in the temple, with all the slaughtering of the animals, the smell of blood and flesh were really unbearable, and that's why we have the order to give the place and garments those who officiate there pleasure odor. And this provision likewise tend to support the dignity of the temple. So from one hand, if people would come to the temple and there's going to be a terrible smell, they're going to step away from the temple, because the human soul is usually distance itself from bad smell. So we had to have a good odor in the temple, and also to protect the dignity of the temple. And if there had not been a good smell, let alone if there had been a stench, it would have produced in the minds of people the reverse of respect, for our heart generally feels elevated in the presence of good odor, and is attracted by it, but it abhors and avoids bad smell. Okay, so Rambam is giving a very practical reason why we had to have this really good smell that spread around the temple, and even spread around all Jerusalem, and we'll see that the sources are saying that even got all the way to Jericho. But Sefer HaChinuch is saying similar things, but he's adding another aspect. And it is also from the roots of this commandment to aggrandize the glory of the temple, and to have its loftiness and awe upon the face of every person. And it is only possible to aggrandize something in the heart of people and their thought with things that one associate with greatness, and in which he will find delight and enjoy. And it is known that the good smell is the thing that the spirit of a person enjoys and desire, and it draws the heart much. And the smell of the incense was the best that can possibly made by man. Okay, we need something to elevate us. We need something to be attracted to, but also give us a sense of delight and joy and greatness. And this can only be done as human beings through smell. And indeed, we hear in Masechet Yoma that goats that were in Jericho would sneeze from the fragrance of the incense from Yerushalayim, and women that were in Jericho did not need to perfume themselves because the smell got and covered all the way to Jericho. And even a bride that was in Jerusalem did not need to adorn herself with perfume, since the fragrance of the incense was so intense and so great and so good, it covered everybody. The idea of a scent, of a good smell as something spiritual, is not new to us in Yahadut. And I brought one example. In Masechet Brachot, Rav Zutra Bar Tuvia Rav said, from where is it derived that one recites a blessing over scent? As we know, Borei Minei Besamim, Borei Atzeh Besamim. As it is stated, let every soul praise the Lord. And he explains that what is it from which the soul derives benefit and the body does not derive benefit? You must say that is scent. In other words, we are body and spirit, guf v'nefesh, and our souls need smell, which is spiritual, to feel good and to benefit. The body doesn't enjoy the smell, say the Chachamim, as much as the soul benefits from smell, and that's why we need to make a bracha. Investigating a little bit more into the incense, into the ktoret, we have lots of details that most of it was also taken to the Siddur from Masechet Kritot. And then the sages taught, how is the blending of the incense, and they give, and there's a long, list of what the different incense and the different blending and the amounts, and they take from what the Torah says that are only few to make them into 11 senses. But the Gemara there also teaches us that the incense was prepared to weigh 368 manna, and 365 of them correspond to the days of the solar year. Like every day there was an amount of manna being bringing into the golden altar, and the additional 3 manna from which the high priest would bring into the sanctuary, into Kodesh Kodeshim, his handful on Yom Kippurim. So 365 time, maneh for each day that was brought in the Kodesh on the golden altar, Mizbeach HaKtoret, and once a day, the extra 3 amounts of maneh that the Kohen would take inside Kodesh HaKodeshim only on Yom Kippurim. And the idea of the Ktoret in Yom Kippurim by the Kohen Gadol is also a fascinating idea, because the description comes in Sefer Vayikra, and we ask ourselves, what is it, Nachon? What is it of the Ktoret that specifically that Korban was brought in Kodesh HaKodeshim only once a year? And the Torah in the Sefer Vayikra is describing the process of Ketoret in Yom Kippurim, and Moshe needs to tell Aaron what to do and how to prepare. But it also says, "For I appear in the cloud over the cover." God is going to show Himself to the Kohen Gadol in Yom Kippurim in the cloud, and that's where He brings the Ketoret over there, and the cloud will cover the incense cover that is over. And Rashi is asking, what is it that specifically? What does that mean that in the cloud of the Ktoret, God will made Himself appearance to the Kohen Gadol? And Rashi is saying, Ki be'anan ereh means, for I constantly show myself there with my pillar of cloud. It's not a new thing. That's how God reveal Himself in the Shekhinah, in Kodesh HaKodeshim, through a cloud. And because the revelation of my Shekhinah takes place there, He should take care not to make it His habit to come there. Okay, the Pshat, says Rashi, is, you can't come every day because there's a presence of God through the Shekhinah in the cloud in Kodesh HaKodeshim, and that even the Kohen Gadol may not go there every day, but only once a year. So make sure this is what you do. This, as Rashi, is the literal meaning of the verse, but the halachic explanation, or the midrashic explanation, says Rashi, he shall not come into the Holy of Holiness except with a cloud of incense on the Day of Atonement. In other words, it's not the cloud of Shekhinah, it's the cloud of the incense. It's the cloud of what the burning incense makes. In other words, the tool, the way for the Kohen Gadol to enter Kodesh HaKodeshim was only through Ketoret. There is something about the Ketoret that allows Kohen Gadol to enter Kodesh Kodeshim. And another thing that the Torah tells us about the Ketoret in Kodesh Kodeshim, that it atones about the Kohen and his family and the entire people. And the Gemara in Masechet Yoma ask and have made atonement for himself and for his household and for all the assembly of Israel. Which act of atonement is the same for him and his household and for his brethren? For his brethren, the priest, and for the entire community of Israel, you must say this is the burning of the incense. The burning of the incense makes kapara, mechaper, atonement for everyone, not just the Kohen and his family and his other Kohanim, but the rest of Am Yisrael. And more aspects of the importance of Ktoret is what I want to show you now. Hanatziv in Aramek Devar is saying, and the main benefit of incense is to bring to mind an act of kindness. The act of kindness itself is liked to incense. In other words, he explains the act of incense in Yom Kippurim, in Kodesh HaKodeshim, because it brings the kindness, the acts of kindness of Am Yisrael, and that's why it atoned. But what do we do today when we don't have Kodesh HaKodeshim, we don't have a Mikdash and a high priest? Says Al-Mek Davar, the act of kindness itself is likened to incense. In other words, not only tefillah is instead of korbanot, but the instance, that's the act instead, an act of kindness that is likened an incense. In other words, whenever we do an act of kindness, an act of chesed, is as if we are Kohen Gadol bringing incense in the Kodesh Kodeshim. The act of kindness equals the Ktoret, the good smell of the Ktoret, the atonement of the Ktoret. And Tzror Amor, Rabbi Yaakov Saba, was from the expulsion from Spain, a great parshan that said, and for this very reason, we say the incense every day. As we started in saying, in the Siddur, we have the recitement of the Ktoret every day. We say the incense every day, morning and evening, after all the prayers, since the incense is the seal of everything and the connection and everything of everything. And how does, like, instead of being in the beginning, beside from being in the beginning of the end, how does Tzror Amor connect the incense to a seal and to connection? And we have a hint from that in Masechet Kritot by Resh Lakish that says that the word Ketoret derives from the word itself. What is the meaning of the term incense? It means an item that smoke and rises. In other words, why does it call Ketoret? Because when you smoke it, the cloud of smell rises up and rises up. But where is the connecting and the seal of everything? That comes from the translation or the transmission of the tet with a shin that usually happens between Ivrit and Aramit with shin and taf. Ktoret is likshor, is to bind. So it's sealing our tefillot, like it sealed the tefillah of Kohen Gadol, and it's elevating us and connecting us, because the word kesher in Ivrit is also binding together. The Ktoret is the thing that binds everything together and also elevating us and sealing us. And it's the thing that rises up as the smoke rises up. The Kli Yakar is giving us another insight. And the Kli Yakar is saying why there were two altars. One is the bronze altar, and the other one was the golden altar. Because he says that the bronze altar is what atoned for the part of material and bodily sins. That's why we need animals, the body of animals. But the altar of incense comes to atone on the spiritual sins, something that connects to the soul, as we said, and raising smoke and a sweet-smelling fragrance to atone the spirit of man, which ascends upwards like the smoke of incense. We can bring an animal because the soul of an animal is not like the soul of a human being. The soul of a human being can be uplifted and go upwards, and for that we need the smell, the sin to go up. But there's another aspect that I wanna show you, and that also appears in Masechet Kritut. And Rav Chana bar Bizna says, in the name of Rabbi Shimon bar Chasida, any fast that does not include of the sinners of the Jewish people is not a fast, as the smell of the chelbonah, the galbanum, is foul, and yet the verse lists it with the ingredients of the incense. There's a very interesting thing happening in the Ketoret. We have a gelbena, we have the chelbena that we know that its smell is very, very bad. Why is it that we add a foul, a bad smell in the incense, that the bottom line is that it smells excellent? Why is the reason? And Rav Shimon Chasida is saying it's a hint for us it's coming to teach us that if we think that we can only join with people that we consider good and take all the sinners, say they do not belong to Am Yisrael, the smell is not going to be perfect. Am Yisrael is not going to be one entity. And we have to be very careful not to disclude and put aside people that we consider them as sinner. And Abaye says, we learn it from here, it is he who built his upper chamber in the heavens and has established his bundle on earth. Agudato al eretz yesada. When the people are united as a bundle, including their sinners, they are established upon the earth in the eyes of God. So the Torah comes to teach us that the mekusharim, the binding together, must be with all parts of Am Yisrael. And Rashi says specifically, chelbena. This is a malodorous spice which is called chelbena. Scripture enumerates it among the spices of the incense to teach us that we should not regard as light things the duty of associating with ourselves when we band together for fast and prayers Israelites who are transgressors, that they should be counted as ourselves. And come Rashi and tells us, why do we have this sense of chelbena, which is a bad smell? It comes to teach us that we shouldn't take it lightly, that when we do something as Am Yisrael, we say, oh, but the transgressors are not part of Am Yisrael. They should be counted as ourselves. We cannot say they're not part of Am Yisrael, even though they're transgressors. And if we would take the chelbena out of the incense, the smell is not going to be as perfect as it was. And we'll finish with words of Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen Milublin in Pri Tzadik. And Rabbi Tzadok is saying the same way that the incense was coming to help us, can Aaron the priest prepare it so that he could bring the souls of Am Yisrael closer by planting their hearts in illumination of holiness for every soul in accordance with the value of his preparation and desire to draw closer to holiness with the light of the mitzvah and the Torah. Says Rabbi Tzadok in Parashat Tetzaveh, we open with the menorah. That's the attempt of Aaron HaKohen and the high priest to bring light to everyone and to bring holiness and illumination to every soul. This parasha ends with Mizbeach HaKtoret, Mizbeach HaZahav, and it concludes with the altar of incense. And we mean the purpose of approaching holiness, even for souls who have already fallen into evil and whose hearts do not turn to holiness. They have hope of turning to good by joining themselves to holiness. In other words, even if we think that there are useless or hopeless people among Am Yisrael, there is always hope and we need to include them. But maybe also hints that even if we feel that there is no hope for us to be joining into holiness and to be acting in good deeds, we should remember that we are together and we are bind together as a people, and we can definitely elevate ourselves if we just put our hearts and mind into it.